Welcome back. This is our 7th show in a series of shows entitled Rehabilitation Coming Soon, where we have been discussing the mass incarceration practices of the United States and their effect on the state of Hawaii. I'm Aaron Wills. I'm a William S. Richardson Law School graduate, and I'm a consultant for retired Judge Mike Towns' private mediation practice. So over the last 6 weeks, we have heard from people in the community who see the problem of mass incarceration from different perspectives. Our first guest was Bob Myles, talked about the very successful Norwegian correctional system and the profound differences between the Norwegian Swiss system and our system. Dr. Mita Chesney-Lind discussed mass incarceration from the perspective of a criminologist. Stephen Morse and Shane Kukuna Okala from Blueprint for Change talked about the effects of mass incarceration on the family. Susan Arnett gave us the perspective of a public defender, and Warden Mark Patterson talked about addressing the problems of juvenile offenders. Last week, Judge Mark Browning talked about the juvenile justice system and the effects of trauma on juvenile offenders. Today, we'd like to hear the perspective of a criminal defense attorney who has extensive experience in all facets of the criminal justice system. Our guest today is Myles Breiner. Myles has his own law practice with a focus on criminal defense, state and federal, including white-collar and drug conspiracy cases. Myles also conducts civil rights litigation, including prisoner rights, illegal arrests, excessive police force, wrongful death, and sexual assault-related matters. Myles is a former prosecuting attorney in California and Hawaii, and is the current president of the Hawaii Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys. Welcome, Myles.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, I know you're very busy. I see you on the news all the time, and your reputation does precede you. I've seen you in court, and I look up to you. I mean, it's obvious that when we get to see you in court, and then people talk us, oh, Myles is up there doing his thing, and you run in there like you want to just see him, do your work. So it's important for us to get your perspective on what's going on in this, criminal justice system. So we wanted to ask, what do you see as the main problem with our criminal justice system that is fueling or contributing to this phenomenon of mass incarceration that's happening?
A combination of things. I mean, it's not one individual factor. Privatization of criminal justice. The problem, I think, at the heart of all this is that we have a desire to not see the problems that we face every day. So the tendency is to mass incarcerate and hopefully keep these folks locked up as long as we can, and maybe the problem will solve itself or go away, or by the time they do get released, they're too old to do any other damage. The problem is that it's the definition of insanity, expecting a different result for the same set of factors you place
Right.
time and time again. I mean, you have to come up with a different solution if you want to get a different result.
That's right. That's right. And currently, the current solution seems to be, build these silos for warehousing criminals. And we were talking about this before, but Bob Myles came on our first show, and he visited Norway, and they have a radically different concept, and it's a philosophy called moving to normalcy, where everything that they build around there is in this concept that they want it to be as normal as possible, so that when they get out, the prisoners get out, they're like in a normal society. So one of the things that was really radical is they would cook food in an open cooking area, and the knives were kept out in the open. And as you know, that's radically different than our
totally
system.
different. But it's the orientation. I mean, ironically, Hawaii is unique in some respects. Everyone knows everyone else.
Right.
We're a small community. We don't have capital punishment. We do have life without the possibility of parole, which is a very unusual sentence to get. Generally speaking, if you're prosecuted and incarcerated in Hawaii, you eventually get released. So we're creating this entire underclass of people who cannot be reintegrated into the community. And once they're incarcerated, it's a stigma that they never can rid themselves of, whether it's for a sex offense or a minor DUI. They carry it along the rest of their lives. So if you're an employer and you want to hire someone who may have the skills, and you discover through going to e-crimes or whatever that they have some prior problem, the tendency is this person's never going to get full employment. The result is we guarantee recidivism. It makes no sense. Now, what's interesting, you asked about one of the core problems, is privatization. We saw this with 9/11. We saw that we had actually more private mercenaries in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we had soldiers, because there was money to be made.
Right.
And the sad part is there's money to be made in mass incarceration. And everyone has a vested interest in this, whether it's the police, or Department of Corrections, or the companies that support and make large profit margins. For example, we have Corrections Corporation of America.
Yeah.
They're the largest single incarcerator of American citizens. They have close to 80 facilities across the country, and they're very talented at what they do. They go into communities that are economically depressed. I can think of, I've been to probably over a dozen and a half CCA-owned facilities, and they tend to be in the middle of nowhere. They tend to be probably the only employer in that community, in that county, and they basically have for-profit incarceration. Hawaii is a good example because we decided that we were going to ship our problem overseas. So we have the vast majority of our male inmates over in Saguaro, in the desert out in Arizona, about an hour south of Phoenix. It's interesting. It's 4 facilities now. Each one of those facilities are owned by CCA. They're all within about 5 square mile area. And CCA gets to cherry pick the inmates. So I mean, you think about this. We have the problem of mandatory sentencing. An example. So an inmate picks up a 20-year sentence and they get a mandatory, they say repeat, they get a mandatory 6 years, 8 months. And the parole board wants them to participate in programming so they can be reintegrated into the community. Well, CCA in their contract with the state of Hawaii is allowed to cherry pick which inmates to take. So are they going to take an inmate who has a short sentence or a long sentence? Are they going to take an inmate with a long sentence who has programs that he has to complete before they're eligible for parole? Consequently, they take the inmates with the longest sentences, with the mandatory sentences, and then stick them out in the desert, provide the barest of programs. Generally, it's a drug program, but any other programming, they don't receive. So when the inmate gets close to their minimum date for parole consideration, they get shipped back to Hawaii and then do a couple more years sitting in Halava because they haven't done their programming that they've been mandated to by the parole board.
Right, so they're going to max out their time, basically. Almost.
Basically, that's true. Even more so because of the change in the laws regarding sex offenses. It's a tragedy. You take people that should be receiving treatment, and certainly is a punishment issue. But the fact is, again, everyone who's incarcerated, the rare exception of someone who gets an extended life term without the possibility of parole, everyone's going to be released into the community. So does it make sense to keep throwing people into custody, providing them with no type of training, programming, or any hope in the future? They're going to become better criminals.
You know, and on that point of, basically that the prisoners almost max out the whole time, the only person that really benefits from them staying in the whole time is CCA because it's a for-profit model and it's built on bed space availability. And if the bed space is open, they're not making money. If someone's in the bed space, they're making money. So it puts the incentive for them to keep people there extendedly.
If you look you add up the number of prisons that CCA has, and you look at the number of inmates that are in the CCA system, only the federal government incarcerates more people.
Wow.
That's a sad statistic.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Can you talk a
and
little...
the for-profit aspect of it, one point I want to
okay.
make is that because their duty, the owners of the company, it's a corporation, their duty is not to the inmates, not to the states that have invested money, their duty is to the shareholders because it's for-profit. They're so successful that in 2010, the chairman of CCA received a $100 million bonus.
Wow, wow. Oh, that's amazing.
So there's money in jail.
Well, on that note, and we know that they're making a ton of money, can you talk, because I know you know about this personally, about the violence that occurs in the CCA-run prisons? Because all the reports that I've read, the violence is at an elevated level. Mostly that can't control the violence that's going on in their prisons.
Well, it's interesting. We had, back in, I believe, about 10 years ago, we had the majority of female prisoners sent up to a place called Otter Creek, Kentucky.
I remember.
It was a decommissioned mine that was that the Kentucky Department of Corrections had converted into a juvenile prison that was run by CCA. That was a disaster. The inmates there, the juveniles, were abused. Kentucky stepped in, they removed the inmates, the juveniles, and then they got CCA to continue with the contract, and they brought in adults. They made it a female prison. So half the prisoners were from Hawaii and half were from Kentucky. By the time I got involved, we had 168 women
That's right.
at Otter Creek. There were so many sex assaults that the chaplain even had to be, as they say, walked off the hill. We had captains, lieutenants, the chaplain. We had women who were on the Kentucky side had gotten pregnant. There were rumors that there were possible abortions that some of the Hawaii inmates had. And it was an embarrassment. Unfortunately, at the time, the acting director of the Department of Public Safety, retired Judge Evelani White, summarily said, "That's it." And all the women were brought back.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, on the male side, it's different. We still insist on shipping men over to Saguaro. The vast majority of these guys, during the course of their incarceration, either get recruited by USO, the United Samoan Organization, or they simply submit to their authority. Now, what generally occurs is the guards in most of the facilities, whether it's CCA-run facility or it's here locally in the islands, either on Oahu or in Kauai or the Big Island or Maui, the various facilities run by the Department of Public Safety, the guards have found it convenient to empower the gangs, primarily USO, in the prison to help control the inmates. So typically the guards do very little with their time during the day. They'll assign a particular individual, generally a shot caller associated with USO, to manage the inmates. And this includes bringing in the drugs and the cell phones and so on. So it's sort of ironic. I mean, the Department of Public Safety and the state and the legislature insists that that we stop corruption in our criminal justice system, in particular in the prisons. You could not have the corruption without the guards, top to bottom, being involved at some level. It's impossible. Now, recently, about a year ago, there was a series of federal indictments. A number of guards were arrested, but everyone knew it was a joke.
Yeah.
You know, and the U.S. Attorney's Office essentially prosecuted a handful of retired guards, a few active guards, but it's still going on. At any given time, and I know for a fact it still goes on because I get phone calls on private cell phones from the various prisons on the island. So it's impossible that these inmates that the families or attorneys are bringing in the contraband. The only way that gets in is you have paid staff that brings it in, and it's a continuing problem.
Oh, it's a huge problem. And to just go back on and talk a little bit about USO and why they're so powerful, you know, even though it stands for United Samoan Organization, they're one of the only gangs that have broken down the racial barriers in prison gangs. And I've heard some reports saying that they're the most powerful prison gang in America because of that. So,
possibly. I mean, understand how this started. Hawaii did not have a gang problem until we contracted with CCA. We had a $50 million contract for the men and women to be shipped to the mainland. And the first group that went was a group of Hawaii inmates to Mississippi, Tallahatchie County Correctional Facility. Myself and Michael Green, other attorney, extremely great trial attorney, Mr. Green and I spent several weeks chasing our tail down in the Mississippi Delta, interviewing and deposing various witnesses to a prison riot in 2004. What we discovered was that the inmates, our inmates from Hawaii, had to get organized because there were gangs already in the prison system. There were black gangs, white gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood, you name it. I mean, every color, every complexion had some type of gang that got organized that was usually racially or linguistically, designated. The Hawaii inmates, if you were from Hawaii, brother, you became part of USO, and they did it to survive.
Yeah, they did.
There was a terrible prison riot, that resulted in Rani Lonaea becoming severely permanently disabled, and there was a massive cover-up by CCA. When Mr. Green and I were traveling around Mississippi doing our investigation, depositions from city and town to town, we discovered that CCA had dispersed all the relevant witnesses, all the eyewitnesses to various CCA facilities all over the country. Ultimately, we did settle the case, but the fact of the matter is that we saw that CCA had a vested interest, financial interest, in keeping the inmates locked up. For example, there is a program that CCA is quite proud of called the SHIP program, Special Housing Incentive Program. And it's basically an 18-month program of being in solitary confinement. If you're an inmate and they want to punish you, they'll let you volunteer to go into solitary confinement in the SHIP program. If you don't voluntarily go in and consent to being in the SHIP program, they put you in admin seg until you are broken and you agree to go into this other program.
Wow.
And that, again, you cannot qualify for parole consideration if you're in the SHIP program. So the result is the majority of our inmates that end up in Saguaro, for example, up on the mainland in Arizona, the majority of them end up at some time or another during their incarceration being forced into the SHIP program. And during that time period, that 18 months where they're in solitary and they're locked down basically 24/7, the parole board won't consider them for parole consideration because they're not doing their programming. They're not ready for furlough to get trained for reintegration, and you just further waste taxpayer money. Meanwhile, ka-ching, ka-ching,
Yeah,
CCA's
CCA
making
makes
money.
money,
Exactly,
right.
exactly.
Well, this is great stuff. We will be right back with defense attorney Myles Breiner. My name is Aaron Wills, and this is Rehabilitation Coming Soon. Thank you.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, offering lifelong learning from passionate hosts and fascinating guests ready to explore and explain Hawaii's place in the 21st century. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Will I be able to get a copy of this?
Welcome back. I am Aaron Wills. This is Rehabilitation Coming Soon, and we're sitting here with our guest, Myles Breiner. Myles, we've been talking a lot about CCA, but I want to kind of just switch the tone of the conversation here and talk more about the prosecutors and what you kind of do, daily with your work. What is this phenomenon called overcharging by the prosecutors, and do you think this is a problem in Hawaii? Do you have any
It's
examples?
a terrible problem. Having been a prosecutor, I can tell you it's common. The point being, if you can overcharge a case, let's say the case is a assault or manslaughter case. You
Okay.
charge it as a murder in the second degree. Then you ask for high bail. You force the person to remain incarcerated so that it compels them to eventually negotiate to plead down to manslaughter.
Okay.
So it's unfair, it's unreasonable, and it puts tremendous pressure on most defendants. Most defendants can't afford to get bailed out. And especially with public defenders cases, they're forced to deal with an enormous load of clients. They're being mass housed at here in Oahu at OCCC. There should be one person per cell. They have 3 guys in a cell, sometimes 4. And if your bail's high, you sit there day in and day out.
Well, what does a prosecutor go through? I mean, I know you got the elements of a crime, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So at what level do they think that they can prove this stuff if they're really trying to get manslaughter, but they're trying to charge murder 2,
Well,
or they can't prove all of murder 2 elements?
It depends. The prosecutor's office has a screening division.
Okay.
And they'll screen the case and look for the highest possible offense they can charge, the one that's most provable. And even when it's questionable they can prove it or not, they'll go with that, charge it, because they know, especially if the person can't afford counsel, that person will then eventually bend to the will of the prosecutors and cut a deal. It's very unfortunate. It's sad. I've had so many cases over the years where the individual should have fought the case. It was a winnable case, but they simply, because they couldn't bail out, they just simply were broken, worn down, and decided, the hell with this. I'll take a deal just to get out of this place. And then when they realize they can't find employment afterwards, and this is especially so in sex offense cases, when you have a defensible case, especially when they talk about human trafficking, this new model that Keith Connoissure's developed to charge individuals with sex trafficking.
Yeah.
Frankly, the officer should be charged with the sex trafficking.
Yeah, I know. I heard that, and I don't know. I mean, there seems to be these special exceptions sometimes that come out for police officers and stuff like that in these situations. It kind of looks like that.
There's always a
parents
double
have that.
standard.
Yeah.
There's a double standard, certainly. I mean, we hear this all the time with the officers who were involved, for example, in the game room, Doc's game room, where 3 officers, one in particular, was on video.
Yeah.
And
I
but for the
remember.
video,
Yeah.
okay, now in that case, the officer came in, Vince Moore,
Yeah.
who was a crew officer, He was looking for a suspect who wasn't there, and two individuals who I happen to represent were seated minding their own business. In fact, looking at the floor because they didn't want to make eye contact because they were so frightened of this guy. He had a reputation of being a bully. And what did he do on video? He kicked both of them in the face, hit him first, and then kicked him in the face, then picked up a metal chair and threw it at one of the individuals and ended up cracking his head. Had to go to the hospital. Actually, both went to the hospital. The irony is that when the officers first came in, they disabled all the security cameras. And that seems to be the standard operating procedure on all these raids by crew members or execution of warrants by SSD, the SWAT team. But generally speaking, they'll disable the cameras. They didn't know that the folks running that game room had installed a camera hidden in the ceiling with a black box that was recording everything. They had seized a hard drive from the floor level.
So they tried to cover it up.
Right. Well, they grabbed the hard drive,
Right.
thinking that this was the real hard drive, and it turned out that it wasn't. That the real hard drive was up in the ceiling with a camera that saved the images of the officers assaulting these two individuals.
And I know that story well. Actually, I was working for a judge, and one of your clients was actually on probation, and so we kind of looked at the case. And
probation.
Yeah. And so when that case came across our desk, we were like, oh my gosh, So, but at the same time, these officers, they get themselves in situations sometimes where they don't think anybody's looking. And in our society, we know today everybody's filming everything, and so it's kind of a warning out there.
Hence the notion of having body cams, and I like the fact that Chief Perry over in Kauai he went out on his own and purchased body cams for everyone.
Yeah, I like that too.
But Shopo,
yeah,
Mr. Teneri, decided Shopo didn't want that. Shopo doesn't want officers being held accountable. And as I said repeatedly to the media, and I stand by my comments, everyone stands to benefit by the body cams. Officers stand to benefit by it, because where there's accusations of excessive force, this eliminates the issue. The public stands to benefit from it. It will reduce the likelihood of lawsuits that are unjustified. In other words, I'm advocating putting me out of business.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say.
I'm more than happy. I'd rather see my tax dollars go into rehabilitative programs, diversion programs, we used to call it in California when I was at the district attorney's office. You can divert people into more effective treatment as opposed to incarcerating them.
Yeah.
Having the cameras it stands to reason everyone benefits. So it's rather ironic that the police union here in Hawaii is adamantly opposed to it, even when the chief of police in Kauai supports it.
Well, let's talk just recently, I always want to talk about solutions. And so what changes would you make to the bail system to make it more fair so that, like say an indigent client or a client who can't afford the higher bails can actually get bail and they can actually produce a good defense for themselves?
We all know the story about how Australia was populated. Debtor's prison. Essentially, there were so many prisoners and so many people in debt. The British had filled up the Thames with decommissioned battleships that were floating jails, and they became so unwielding and impossible to control, they started shipping thousands of people to Australia.
Okay.
Hey, now, our present system feels like that, although you can't incarcerate someone because they don't pay their debt. Essentially, that's what it comes to. We have debtor's prison. We're putting people in custody with high bail, keeping them locked up on high bail. Now, the solution? Well, if they can't afford bail, then we should be coming up with programs, diversion programs, places setting to halfway houses that are properly funded by the state. Again, I submit the money that we're spending on CCA, for example, the $50 million a year the legislature is spending in their contracts to house Hawaii inmates on the mainland should be rejected wholeheartedly and should go into programming that supports Hawaii, supports people in Hawaii. Have halfway houses, for example, that are locally run, locally owned, nonprofits that can provide not just simply a place to live, but programming. Locking someone up pending trial is not the solution, because that person, as I said at the outset of this our talk, eventually they're going to get released.
Yeah.
And you want that person released feeling that maybe they have hope. And it's huge. When someone has hope that maybe they can turn their life around, whether they're a first-time offender or multiple offender, and the fact is that we know, you've seen it when you were working for Judge Alm, I've seen it my entire career in Hawaii, we have multi-generational defendants, and it's not their fault.
Yeah.
I mean, if you incarcerate a father whether he's married or not. You incarcerate a father, and the children are visiting them at Halava or Waiava or at OCCC or wherever jail they're in. The children are seeing this is the template. This is appropriate. Okay, to end up here to see daddy, to see mommy, to see your brother. It's terrible, and you set this individual down a path that otherwise they wouldn't be exposed to that. And it has huge consequences emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering, actually. If one parent is incarcerated or both, the likelihood that the child will too be incarcerated is somewhere around 70 to 80%.
I just had a case in federal court where I represented, I had mom, dad, the grandfather, the grandmother, aunt and uncle, and their 2 kids. An entire family, talking 3 generations.
That's all they know.
3 generations.
Yeah.
You know, and it was the same thing. Everyone was exposed using drugs. Most of them did not finish school. Only 1 or 2 managed to actually walk, as we say, finished high school.
Right.
But they had no future. And part of that is a function of the economy that we have in Hawaii. We're a service economy. So if we're not preparing our young people to have a future, we're basically saying to them, your greatest point in life is finishing high school. After that, we don't care. And that's wrong.
No, it is wrong.
That's just wrong. You know, we create this huge gap between the have and the have-nots, and you create a great deal of bitterness and resentment. You see that, you know, with some of the behavior in Waikiki, where tourists are subjected to break-ins, sometimes assaults.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see that, you know, in the court system, you know, one case after another where someone is breaking into a car to fuel a drug habit,
Yep.
or they get picked up and they lose their license, and then it's downhill from there. Once they lose the license and have to, they can't afford to do the interlock device on their vehicle, and then they still go to work or try to work, and they get pulled over again. And next thing you know, this person has a history of driving with no license. They end up in jail. It's a cycle. So it's silly. It's as I said before, it's the definition of insanity. You expect a different result. You're doing the same thing over and over again.
Earlier, you said something about, you know that contraband's getting into the prisoners because they're calling you on the cell phones, and the cell phones they're not supposed to have. You can't have cell phones in
It's
prison.
hilarious. I have my personal number, I have my business card. And I get a call at some odd hour from the jail, and I laugh, and I go, oh, you're borrowing a cell phone from a sergeant?
Well, you know what's funny? I was kind of just interested. What do they tell you? I mean, are they telling you about how they're being treated, or is it more like legal advice, or let's talk about my case?
Oh,
or...
they'll call and say, can you call my mom? Can you call my girlfriend? Or can you call my husband or my boyfriend? It's because they feel cut off. Or can you come and see me? You haven't seen me in a while.
Right.
Things of this nature. You know, real basic stuff. But on the other hand, in the federal system, they have open telephones. That so long as they have a card, no one says you can't call out. In the Federal Detention Center here in Honolulu, we have what's called Core Links. Core Links is an email system so that an inmate, and they tell you your email is being monitored, but it makes a huge difference. Well, they know, but the inmates are able to communicate with their family as long as they're approved with their attorneys, and it helps their time in prison. It's a more effective way of dealing with the problem. They can call out. There's a phone. They're not locked down 24/7. They have basketball court, handball court, things of this nature that, frankly, most of my clients who are locked up in the state system ask me over and over again, can you get me to the feds?
I was just going to ask that because
they're better trained.
Yeah.
The guards have mandatory training. They're not allowed to have contact with inmates until they've done an X number of months. I believe it's 6 months to a year before they're allowed to actually go into the modules. They make sure they're sexually segregated. We do not have male guards in the female section. The male guards in the federal system can only go so far into the pods. Otherwise, it's all female inmates. See, certain basic things we take for granted don't exist on the state side. And it isn't like they're bad people at the Department of Public Safety. Just the opposite. They see this, they know this better than I, and better than other attorneys because they deal with it every day. The problem is getting the legislature and the public to support putting money into something where there is no immediate return, where it's more of a long-term investment.
Yep.
And that's
and you're investing in people too. So
well, that's really the greatest currency is investing in people.
Right.
We say it to our children. You know, finish school, go to school. We know statistically, the more education you have, the more money you'll make. I mean, if you want to be greedy about it, get an education. Get more of an education.
Absolutely. All right, well, we will be right back after these messages with Myles Breiner. My name is Aaron Wills, and this is Rehabilitation Coming Soon. Thank you.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. Take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around, we'll see you then.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm fortunate to be able to host Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. I hope you'll join in with us every Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. to see the interesting people we have to share with you their information. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Carl Campagna. I am the host of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. You can see our show every Wednesday at noon at 12 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, as well as visiting YouTube and finding the link for the show there. The show is also aired on OC16. We look forward to seeing you on the show. We have many wonderful guests, including Joan Husted, Corey Rosenlee, where we talk about the very important issues of education for our keiki. We look forward to seeing you there. Mahalo.
Okay, here we go.
My wife's time.
Welcome back. I'm Aaron Wills. This is Rehabilitation Coming Soon, and we are discussing the criminal justice system from a defense attorney's perspective with Myles Breiner. Well, Myles, I wanted to continue on and just talk a little bit about parole, because I know that you've been in front of the parole board a lot with a lot of your clients and stuff. And so one of the things is Hawaii is the only state where the parole board typically sets the minimum term of imprisonment for someone convicted of a crime. So if you're convicted at the trial judge doesn't set the minimum. You go down to the parole board, and months later you have to go in front of them, present arguments, and then they set the minimum of what your minimum is going to be. Do you think this is a good system?
It's horrible. It's horrible and it's outrageous, and everyone knows it is. I mean, the irony is that we have a system of transparency. We have a right to a jury trial, a right to confrontation, a right to have an attorney, whether appointed or privately retained, yet we throw that all away after someone gets convicted and gets an open sentence. They now go before essentially a starved chamber where you can't put on witnesses. The board is given basically the closing report. They get a recommendation from the prosecutors, a recommendation to the parole board that they couldn't get a sitting judge to agree to. Okay. Among other problems. So essentially you have inmates, when you go before the board and you get a minimum term, you're being told, well, we recognize that you had an open sentence, and we could have given you 0 time, given that you've gone through drug rehab, or you finished your sex offender treatment program, or whatever, your first-time offense. Instead, the attitude is, well, we have to reach what's called parity, since we have our statistics show that people that, say, have a Class C felony for UEMV, entering a vehicle without someone's permission, or UCPV, stealing a vehicle, those are Class C felonies. But statistically, the board will say, well, we'd like to let you go. You've been in custody, for X number of months before coming in front of us. They say, but however, other inmates similarly situated, they got 18 months minimum, or 2 years minimum.
Right.
We want you to do this programming and that programming. When it makes no sense, when it ends up being a disincentive to want to change your life. Completely disincentive. Instead, you want to offer them something more, which is, we're going to give you no jail, you've done your time, but we're going to put you in a intensive parole program. You're going to wear a monitor. You're going to go and do these things, and there's going to be consequences if you don't do these things. Instead, you stick someone in the hole and wait a couple years, and hopefully they'll have a change in their attitude. Yeah, the attitude, they got to change. Their attitude's terrible by the time they come in front of the board. And the board hears the same thing all the time. They found God. They have a new look on life. They'll say whatever they need to say to the board. I've had many instances where the board members have asked questions, well, how do you feel about what you did?
Right.
And they're on appeal. So they can't say anything because their attorneys instructed them, well, don't comment, we're on appeal. Then the board says, well, you're not showing any remorse.
Yeah, I see, yeah.
And they get a higher minimum. It's difficult, it's very difficult.
How many times have you seen this happen? I've heard about it happening every once in a while where, maybe someone sits in, jail the whole time while, before they get sentenced, and they go in front of the board, and the board says, credit for time served. Have you ever had that ever happen to you, where they've actually gave your guy credit for the time served that he's been in, and sometimes it takes a year, maybe 2 years to get the whole
It's
process?
really rare. Not with the present composition of the board. Generally, no. Something did occur that happened, but that was a unique situation. The person was retaken on a case, and it was a mistake. It turns out that they were cooperating with the authorities on a neighbor island, and there was a mistake on a telephone communication. The result was he was put back in custody, and the reality is he should be released. So, but he's done actually 6 months in prison waiting to go in front of the board. But the bottom line is no. The mandatory minimums make no sense. These minimum term proceedings send the wrong message. We need to get inmates paroled. We need to get them into programs. Then you have politics. I have a case involving a gentleman who's been in custody for 33 years. After the first 15 years, the parole board recommended furlough as a precondition of parole.
Okay.
Now, furlough is controlled by the Department of Public Safety. Unfortunately, the prosecutor, Mr. Kaneshiro, has a great deal of influence, and he's convinced the Department of Public Safety to not allow this particular inmate to be placed in furlough. So for the last 18 years since then, he's come up for parole consideration every single year. And I have represented him for the last 10 years before the board. And for the last 10 years, the board has recommended furlough. And he wants to do furlough because he's been in prison for so long that he needs that transition assistance and to get his feet, so to speak, so he can stand up on his own. Sadly, turned down every time, primarily because the prosecutor's office has taken a position, we don't want this person released, even though the board, the problem is because the board doesn't control furlough, only parole, Department of Public Safety becomes a gatekeeper. So they get to pick and choose who they want to release on furlough. What's also interesting is this individual has become the go-to person. He's been trained as an electrician over the 30 years he's been in prison.
Oh, wow.
So he's the principal electrician for the prison that he's housed in. Now, recently, we finally found a family member whose husband's retired federal law enforcement to be transferred to an interstate compact to another state.
Okay.
We thought that was going to work. And initially, that state, this is Texas, had agreed to accept this inmate.
Right.
Someone, we don't know who, got to someone in Texas, and they recanted. They said, no, we're not going to take him. Well, the problem is there's a contract. The interstate compact is a contract from state to state to state.
Right.
They reconsidered. We thought he was going to get transferred. At the last minute again, there was some influence, undue or otherwise, and now he's in holding again. So here it's by the end of, I think by December of this year, it'll be year 34 that he's been in, and as I said, 15 years after his minimum sentence was done. Now the irony is that Mr. Kaneshiro has had a hand in this. What's particularly irritating is that he was party to the original agreement 33 years ago. They didn't give him life without the possibility of parole. They gave him a life sentence with the possibility. After 15 years and having completed the sex offender treatment program 6 times, he's done it 6 times, and now he's a mentor to help other inmates.
He's teaching the program, right?
He's teaching the program.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what he's doing. They still won't release him because Department of Public Safety, not the Parole Board, controls furlough. So I would say right off the bat, first thing we need to do, take furlough away from the Department of Public Safety. If the Parole Board is going to make furlough a condition precedent of anyone's release, then they should be able to control it. Instead, they have to go begging to the Department of Public Safety to move people into furlough.
I see.
So it only delays people getting released, which results in more people being kept in prison, and you overcrowding, and you get longer sentences and longer minimum terms, and they end up getting shipped up to Saguaro. So, as I said, there's profit in locking people up.
And it seems to be some kind of favoritism going on here. I mean, especially when, one person, they have an incentive for whatever reason their reasons are to keep him in, and it's violating his due process rights. I mean, if they say you're eligible for furlough, and all it is basically him waiting in line to start the furlough, but magically he's never put on the list.
Well, we sued in federal court, and the court determined that furlough is not a right. Furlough is a privilege. Parole is a privilege. You are not mandated, the state's not mandated to do it. They basically, since it's not a right, but a privilege, it can be withheld. So the court refused to consider it, and the case was thrown out.
Wow. There's always those, secret little passages that they seem to always pry away. But I wanted to go a little bit back to what we talked about abuse of prisoners, and just ask, what can we do about the abuse of prison? Is it more education of the training guards? Is there a problem with the education of the training guards currently in our system? And I mean, what's the answer? We just prosecute everybody that screws up?
You talked earlier about the Norwegian model.
Right.
Throughout the EU, there's a higher standard of education and training. I
Yep.
know in Holland, as well as throughout Scandinavia in particular. Here in Hawaii, frankly, and it's no disrespect to the members of the Department of Public Safety and the adult correctional officers, it's an extremely low standard. They don't even require high school graduation. The GED is sufficient.
Wow.
Essentially, the vast majority of the ACOs are not equipped to deal with mentally disturbed inmates, and the vast majority of inmates have mental health issues.
Yeah.
Most of my clients who end up in prison are in prison because they had mental health issues, whether it's impulse control and they use drugs, or they drink and do various crazy things, or they come from a home where there's been drug history and alcohol abuse and maybe suffer from fetal alcohol syndrome. The fact is that I can't think of anyone that does criminal defense work, albeit a private attorney or a public defender, that doesn't encounter on a daily basis clients who are psychologically challenged, that have all types of psychological issues.
Yeah.
Guards are not prepared to deal with this. The result is they get abused, and they get worse and worse and worse. The answer has been, unfortunately, to medicate. So you see a lot of inmates are being given Xanax and Prozac, and basically drugs to make them passive and more easily to deal with in the system.
Yep, I agree. I was a social worker for a long time. I worked with people with mental disabilities, and that's the biggest problem, is that their answer to this is just give them as much medications as possible, make them basically a walking zombie so that they're manageable, and it somehow eliminates a threat. But what it does is it takes their quality of life away from these people, and they have no quality of life. They're just like, they're vegetables. They sit there and they don't do anything.
It's a management device.
Yeah.
And the guards are not trained to deal with this. They're not trained to deal with their own temper issues, their own violence. There's a lot of frustration. The guards are under a lot of pressure. Hence, they tend to, as I said earlier, they offset their responsibilities by delegating it to a gang member. It's unfortunate. You end up creating this class of people that are really never going to escape the criminal justice system. Right,
I agree. Well, Myles, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know you're super busy. Like I said, you're a hero of mine. I love watching you do your work, and I know a lot of other people do too. Everybody in this town respects you, whether they want to say it or not. But join us next week for another show of Rehabilitation Coming Soon, as we continue our discussion on mass incarceration and the effects of those practices on the state of Hawaii. And stay tuned, because coming up next is Sustainable Hawaii with Kirsten Turner. Thank you.